King of the Sahara. Peasants on Tegron.
Preface. The Sahara Kingdom, a vast expanse stretching across the Mediterranean coast, an endless desert cradling the heritage of countless tribes, a realm where the sun burns relentlessly upon a proud land. In its heart stood a palace of golden sands, ruled by one mighty king, King Ali Baba, the king of the Sahara, whose power was unmatched, whose name commanded both fear and reverence. Ali Baba forged a kingdom that thrived not only on tradition and wealth, but also through a delicate balance of alliances, many of which were born out of necessity, greed, and cunning. As European explorers ventured into the land of Africa, drawn by riches untold and a thirst for conquest, they found an unexpected ally in King Ali Baba. In exchange for power and treasure, Ali Baba entered into a sinister alliance with the foreign invaders, allowing them to plunder his kingdom and enslave his people. This bond brought untold wealth to the throne, yet a shadow crept over the kingdom as the people suffered under the weight of the colonial grip. The king's court was a lavish one, overflowing with opulence and indulgence. Ali Baba had many wives and even more concubines, a symbol of his power and virility. Among them, one concubine held his favor above all, the mother of his first son, Prince Ali II. Born into privilege and groomed to inherit his father's throne, Prince Ali II was a child of destiny. Yet his path was to take an unexpected turn. The king, eager to understand the machinations of his foreign allies, sent his beloved son to study in the land of the white man. He believed that understanding the ways of Europe would strengthen his grip on power, but instead, it sowed the seeds of rebellion. In England, Prince Ali II's eyes were open to a world unlike his own. He saw the power of knowledge, the promise of progress, and the cruelty of exploitation. He learned of freedom and justice, concepts foreign to a land ruled by an absolute monarch under colonial influence. And as he returned to his father's kingdom, he could no longer ignore the suffering of his people, their lands exploited, their dignity stripped away, all for the wealth of the palace and the ambition of a king who had struck a deal with invaders. Thus began a quiet revolution, one that would change the Sahara Kingdom forever. Prince Ali II would ultimately rise against his own father, rejecting both the old ways of a customary monarchy and the influence of the colonial powers that had kept his people in chains. He led a rebellion that shook the very foundations of the kingdom, challenging the authority of the king, denouncing the alliance with the Europeans, and fighting for the sovereignty of the Sahara. This is the story of the rise and fall of two kings, the tale of Ali Baba, who betrayed his people for power, and Ali II, who sought to redeem his father's sins by freeing the Sahara from the shackles of colonial rule. It is a story of betrayal, of rebellion, and of redemption. A story of a kingdom caught between tradition and modernity, between the sands of the past and the hope of a brighter future. In the end, it is the story of a land and its people, a land that has endured, and a people who have survived through the harshest of trials. The kingdom of the Sahara, once a pawn in the hands of foreign powers and the greed of a king, would rise anew under the leadership of a son who dared to defy fate. And though the sands shift and the winds change, the legacy of those who fight for freedom remains, etched forever in the vast desert that stretches across the Mediterranean, a legacy of the king of the Sahara. King Zir and the Battle of Papillon. The dawn of the Battle of Papillon broke over the endless sands, the sun casting a blood-red hue over the battlefield that would decide the fate of the Sahara Kingdom. For centuries, Papillon had been the heart of power, its rich soil laden with gold, diamonds, and the natural wealth that every king coveted. To rule over the entire Sahara, you must rule over Papillon for its riches, and thus, every kingdom from the far reaches of the empire had fought, plotted, and killed to claim it. But today, it would be more than gold or diamonds that would be decided. Today, the very future of the Sahara Kingdom hung in the balance. King Zir, the reigning ruler of the Sahara, although old, but his aging knowledge of battle gave him an edge over the rest of the kings fighting for the throne. He has trained Ali Baba, the art of war. Ali Baba was like a son, and the best friend of King Zir's first son and heir to the throne, Prince Bija, before unfortunate attack on his crown that claimed the lives of his entire household. As he stood atop the cliffs overlooking the battlefield, his tall, weathered frame wrapped in the royal colors of Saharan. His gaze swept over the sea of soldiers below, his own and his enemies. The kingdoms of Nimbia, Kuntu, and Zimba, united in their desire to see him dethroned, had gathered their armies against him. But Zir was not alone. The northern caliphates, once bitter rivals, had pledged their loyalty to him after their crushing defeat in the last great war. And by his side stood his greatest asset, Adi Baba, his young and fearless general, whose name had already become legend in the empire. Zir's face was etched with weariness. He had lost much in his reign, his family, poisoned by the treacherous king of Kuntu. The venomous plot had nearly claimed his own life as well. But Zir had survived, clinging to life with the same fierce determination that had carried him through countless battles. The poison had not killed him, but it had left him weakened, a shadow of the warrior king he had once been. And so, as the armies assembled for the Battle of Papulon, Zir knew this would be his final stand. Whether he survived or not, this would be the day that decided the fate of MP, the Sahara Kingdom. If he were victorious, he would name Adi Baba as his successor, installing him as the next king of the Sahara. If he fell, the entire empire would be plunged into chaos. King Zir, though weakened from the poison that nearly claimed his life, sees in Adi Baba the future of the Sahara Kingdom. And in his final act as king, he crowns Adi Baba the new ruler of the United Sahara, a king forged in the fires of battle and destined to bring peace to the vast continent. Zir turned to Adi Baba, who stood at his side, his dark eyes scanning the horizon with cold calculation. The young general was a warrior like none other, fearless and swift. He had risen through the ranks with astonishing speed, his battlefield victories earning him a reputation that struck fear into the hearts of his enemies. "My reign as king will end soon?" Zir said, his voice gravelly with age and the weight of the day. Adi Baba, his face set in grim determination. "For as long as I breathe, we will win this day." Zir managed a small smile. "And it shall be your victory. You must. When this is over, I will not be here to see it, but the throne will be yours. The kingdom will need you, Adi. They will look to you to unite them, to bring peace to this land that has known nothing but war." Adi Baba glanced at the king, the weight of his words sinking in. "We will win, and you will live to see it," he said, though even he knew it was a hope more than a certainty. Below them, the armies began to move. Behind them marched the forces of Nimbia, their ancient feud with Saharan still burning like an open wound. And far to the west, the Zimba cavalry waited, ready to strike at the first sign of weakness. "Sound the drums," Zir ordered. "Let them know we are ready." The deep, rhythmic thrum of the war drums echoed across the battlefield, shaking the very earth beneath their feet. Zir's forces, bolstered by the northern caliphates, began their advance. Adi Baba rode at the head of the cavalry, his eyes fixed on the enemy lines. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was sharp, calculating every move, every potential weakness in the enemy's formation. The Nimbian forces soon fray, their archers will rain death from the cliffs above. But Zir's archers answered in kind, sending volleys of arrows that blackened the sky. The battle is set to be a great chaos, a storm of steel and fire. The battle strategy of Adi for Baba to ensure victory at the Battle of Papulon, he must navigate a complex landscape of military strategy, positioning, and psychological warfare. Zir's forces are significantly outnumbered by the coalition of the Zimba, Kuntu, and Nimbia armies. Adi Baba understands that victory will not be achieved through brute force alone. The battlefield is dynamic, and exploiting the weaknesses of the enemy formations while maintaining the morale and discipline of his own troops will be critical. The Zimba forces are known for their highly mobile cavalry, which they rely on to harass and outflank their enemies. Their riders are lightly armored but swift, striking quickly and retreating before the enemy can retaliate. Adi Baba's strategy to bait and counter is perfected as he instructs his lightly armored cavalry to advance ahead of the main force, feigning a weak position. The Zimba cavalry, sensing an opportunity, will charge to outflank this forward unit. Ali Baba has positioned hidden pikes and spearmen in the dunes nearby, covered by the sand and terrain. As soon as the Zimba cavalry commits to the charge, the baited cavalry will retreat quickly, and the spearmen will rush out from their concealed positions, forming a line of bristling pikes to impale the oncoming Zimba horses. In another flack of his plot to encircle the Zimba troop, once the Zimba cavalry falters and becomes disorganized by the surprise pike wall, Ali Baba sends in a second wave of heavy cavalry from the rear, trapping the Zimba riders between the pikes and the fresh cavalry charge. Caught off guard and surrounded, the Zimba cavalry will be unable to retreat and quickly collapse. The first clash was like a thunderbolt. The Kunta warriors slammed into the Saharan infantry, their swords flashing in the sunlight. Screams of battle filled the air as blood soaked the sand. But Ali Baba was already moving. He led a flanking charge, his cavalry cutting into the Kunta ranks like a blade through cloth. He was everywhere at once, his sword ablur as he carved a path through the enemy lines, breaking the Kunta military gallantry. The Kunta army, led by their venomous king, surged forward, their banners rippling in the wind, famed for its well-disciplined infantry, marching in tight phalanx formations. Their soldiers wear heavy armor, and their ranks are almost impenetrable. The Kunta soldiers are also fiercely loyal and known for their gallantry and pride in battle, making them difficult to rout. But Ali Baba led the Zir's army break the Kunta phalanx and shatter their morale. Ali Baba's strategy, divide and disrupt, has to work or the fall to the Kuntun. Rather than engage the Kunta phalanx head-on, Ali Baba orders his archers to rain down a barrage of Ace ram oil with its gassed burns of fire on the Kunta front lines. While they attempt to disperse, the will rain in arrows tipped with burning Papuloan oil, igniting the dry desert brush around the Kunta soldiers. This creates confusion and breaks the cohesion of their tight formations as they are forced to maneuver around the fire. A flanking attack as the Kunta infantry is distracted by the flames and arrow barrage, Ali Baba sends a detachment of fast-moving infantry through a narrow ravine to attack the Kuntu's unprotected flanks. With the Kunta phalanx broken up by fire and surprise flanking attacks, their ranks will be scattered, and their heavy armor will become a liability as they struggle to react. Ali Baba exploits the Kuntu's sense of honor by capturing a high-ranking Kunta general in the chaos. He orders the captured general to be paraded near the battlefield, demoralizing the Kunta soldiers and sowing doubt among their ranks about the strength of their leadership. The Nimbia Battalion, Guerrilla Tactics. The Nimbia Battalion, known for its guerrilla-style warfare, using the landscape to their advantage, setting traps, and attacking in small, coordinated ambushes. They are excellent in hit-and-run tactics, relying on the terrain and speed rather than direct confrontation. Zir's last objective is set to outmaneuver and neutralize Nimbia's guerrilla forces, drawing them into open confrontation. Ali Baba's strategy is to lure the ambushers, aware that Nimbia's forces will avoid open battle and instead attempt to lead his army into a series of ambushes. He therefore orders a smaller detachment to act as bait, appearing vulnerable and disorganized, and moves them through narrow passes where Nimbia ambushes are likely. Ambush the ambushers. Unbeknownst to the Nimbian forces, Ali Baba has already scouted these regions in advance and placed hidden archer units and cavalry detachments in the nearby cliffs and high ground. As soon as the Nimbian battalion springs their ambush on the baited unit, Ali Baba's hidden forces attack from above, turning the ambush into a massacre. Cutting off escape, knowing that the Nimbia forces will attempt to flee once the ambush fails, Ali Baba orders his fast-moving cavalry to block off all escape routes. The guerrilla fighters, unprepared for prolonged combat, will be forced into a pitched battle where they are at a disadvantage. As the final confrontation came to a stand, it became eminent that King Zir win the great battle of Papulan. With the Zimba cavalry neutralized, the Kunta phalanx shattered, and the Nimbia ambushers outmaneuvered, the remaining enemy forces gather for a final stand at the heart of Papulan. This is the moment Ali Baba has been waiting for, the decisive confrontation that will determine the ruler of the Sahara. Defeat the remaining coalition forces in a pitched battle, securing the throne for King Zir. Gathers the remaining forces of Zir's army, reinforced by the northern caliphates, into a central position, ensuring they have the high ground in the battle. He uses his knowledge of the terrain to force the enemy into a disadvantageous position, with their backs to the desert and their supplies stretched thin. False retreat Adi Baba instructs a portion of his army to perform a feigned retreat, pulling back as if they are overwhelmed. The coalition forces, emboldened by the apparent retreat, pursue aggressively, believing they have gained the upper hand. However, this maneuver is a ruse. The retreating soldiers lead the coalition forces into a narrow valley, where the ground has been prepared in advance with concealed trenches and spike traps. Pincer movement. Once the enemy is trapped in the valley, Adi Baba springs the trap. His forces close in from both sides in a classic pincer movement, cutting off the coalition's escape and forcing them into a confined space where they cannot maneuver. The archers stationed on the high cliffs rain arrows down upon them, while the cavalry charges from the rear. Crushing the center at the critical moment, Adi Baba leads a direct assault on the weakened center of the coalition forces. The shock and awe of his heavy cavalry, combined with the morale-shattering traps and ambushes, cause the coalition ranks to collapse. The remaining enemy forces, disoriented and surrounded, surrender or flee into the desert. Victory and aftermath. As the dust settles on the battlefield, Adi Baba stands victorious. The Zimba cavalry has been decimated, the Kunta phalanx broken, and the Nimbia guerrillas crushed. With this victory, Adi Baba has ensured that King Zir retains his crown, but more than that, he has proven his ability to command, to strategize, and to lead. Suddenly, a cry went up from the battlefield, a rallying call from the enemy. The Kunta king had entered the fray, his armored figure cutting through Zir's forces with brutal efficiency. Zir knew this was the moment. If the Kunta king broke their lines, the battle would be lost. But then, like a whirlwind, Adi Baba appeared. He charged directly at the Kunta king, his sword raised high. The clash between the two warriors was like the meeting of two storms, fierce, violent, and unstoppable. The Kunta king fought with the rage of a man who had nothing to lose, but Adi Baba fought with the precision of a master warrior. Blow after blow was exchanged, sparks flying as their swords met. And then, with one swift, brutal strike, Adi Baba drove his sword through the Kunta king's chest. The enemy king staggered, blood pouring from the wound, before collapsing to the ground. With their king dead, the Kunta forces faltered. The Nimbian and Zimba armies, seeing the tide turn, began to retreat. The Battle of Papulan was won. As the dust settled, Adi Baba stood over the body of the Kunta king, his chest heaving with exhaustion. Around him, the surviving Saharan soldiers cheered, their voices rising in a victorious roar. But for Adi Baba, the victory was bittersweet. He raced back to the cliffs where Zir had been watching. But when he reached the king, Zir was slumped against the rocks, his breathing shallow. The old king opened his eyes as Adi Baba knelt beside him. "It is done," Zir whispered. "Papulan is ours." Adi Baba nodded, tears stinging his eyes. "It is." Zir smiled weakly. "Then I have kept my promise. The kingdom, the throne, it is yours now." With his last breath, King Zir, ruler of the Sahara, passed into the sands. And there, in the shadow of the cliffs, Adi Baba was crowned king of the Sahara, the fearless warrior who would unite the kingdoms and rule over the vast continent, forging an era that would be remembered for centuries to come. The sands had spoken, and the crown had chosen its new king. Chapter 1. The Sand and the Crown. The heat of the day was beginning to fade, and the long shadows of the palace walls stretched across the courtyard as dusk approached. King Adi Baba sat on his elaborate throne, a seat carved from the finest ebony wood, inlaid with gold and adorned with silk cushions. The throne room was filled with a sense of restlessness that mirrored the king's mood. He leaned forward, his hands tightly gripping the lion-carved arms of his throne, his eyes fixed on the great double doors at the far end of the room. A messenger had arrived from the distant mountain climb, a rugged and fertile land known for its rich harvests and its humble people. They were a proud folk, ruled by a chief who had served as an intermediary between the mountain villages and the Sahara kingdom's throne. The message brought by the young courier was dire. A snakebite had taken the life of the mountain chief. King Ali Baba's eyes darkened as he read the parchment, his face revealing no emotion, yet his mind whirled with calculations. The mountain climb was vital to his kingdom, its fertile lands fed the people, and its people paid taxes to his coffers. The chief's death was an inconvenience, an unexpected event that required immediate attention. The mountain people were fiercely loyal to their local leaders, and a gap in leadership could create unrest. Ali Baba knew this well. With a wave of his hand, the king summoned Haroun, the most trusted of his advisors. Haroun, an elderly man with a long, silver beard and a knowing gaze, approached the throne with a respectful bow. Fontai, prepare an emissary, Ali Baba commanded, his voice firm but thoughtful. We must send someone to the mountains to assess the situation and crown a new chief. The people must know that their king stands with them. Fontai nodded, the wisdom of years reflecting in his eyes. Yes, your majesty. I shall prepare a delegation at once. May I suggest your son, Prince Adi II, for this task? His presence would show the people the strength of the royal family. The king paused, considering Fontai's suggestion. Prince Adi II had returned from England only a year before, and already the young man had shown himself to be restless, even rebellious. He was constantly speaking of change, of progress, of ideas that had no place in the established order of the Sahara kingdom. Perhaps a task like this, something that would connect him with his own people, would be the right way to quell his wandering thoughts. Very well, Ali Baba replied, a slight smile touching his lips. Adi shall lead the delegation. It will do him good to see the land of his ancestors, to understand the weight of the crown that he shall one day wear. As the preparations for the delegation were made, the palace bustled with an energy that seemed to contrast with the king's growing frustration. For days, Ali Baba had been waiting for the arrival of the white traders from the northern desert. These men were crucial to his plans. They brought goods and treasures that were rare and valuable, gunpowder, fine silks, and knowledge of the world beyond the sands. Yet they were late, delayed by the slow pace of their camels and donkeys, and each day of their absence gnawed at the king's patience. The king's wives, sensing his irritation, had taken turns to calm him. One by one, they came to him with sweet words and gentle hands, offering him comfort and distraction. Yet it was his favorite concubine, Nalia, who truly soothed his weary mind. She was the most brilliant and beautiful woman, with eyes as dark as the night sky and a voice that flowed like honey. She alone could bring a smile to his face in these troubled times. Now, as the sun dipped below the horizon, King Ali Baba retired to his private chambers, where Nalia awaited him. She knelt gracefully beside the low bed, her slender fingers brushing against the silken sheets as she looked up at him with a knowing smile. My king, you seem troubled, she murmured, her voice soft, almost a whisper. The traders will come. They always do. Ali Baba sighed, reaching out to run his fingers through her hair. It was a simple gesture, one of possession, but also of a certain tenderness that he rarely showed to anyone. It is not only the traders, he admitted, his voice heavy. There is unrest in the mountains, and the delays from the north only add to my worries. This kingdom is vast, Nalia. It stretches from the sands of the desert to the fertile slopes of the mountains. To rule it is to bear a heavy burden. Nalia rose gracefully, moving to sit beside him. She placed her hand on his, her touch gentle and reassuring. But you are strong, my king. You have forged alliances, kept the kingdom at peace. You have nothing to fear. Ali Baba looked at her, the lines of his face softening for a moment. There are things that even strength cannot conquer, he said, almost to himself. The loyalty of my people depends on many things: fear, tradition, the promises I have made. But times are changing, and I wonder if even the power I wield is enough. The king fell silent, his thoughts drifting to his son, Adi too, who would soon leave for the mountains. The boy spoke often of freedom, of education, of ideas he had brought back from the white man's world. He had always been different, even as a child, curious, questioning, unwilling to accept the world as it was. Adi Baba wondered, not for the first time, whether sending his son to England had been a mistake. The next morning, as the sun rose over the palace, Prince Adi too stood in the courtyard, dressed in traveling robes, his face set with determination. Around him, the delegation gathered, warriors, advisors, and servants, all prepared for the journey to the mountain climb. Adi Baba watched from the balcony, his expression unreadable as he observed his son. The boy was strong, confident, and there was a spark in his eyes, a spark that spoke of ambition, of vision. Adi Baba could only hope that the journey ahead would temper that spark, would teach the young prince the true weight of power and responsibility. As the delegation set out, the king turned away from the balcony, his heart heavy with unspoken fears. The kingdom was vast, the throne